Humanitarno udruženje El Iman organizira distribuciju kurbana u 11 zemalja svijeta. Humanitarno udruženje El Iman, naša djeca, naša budućnost. Donirajte svoj kurban danas.
Poštovani gledalci, nekada se događaji tako poslože da je sve slučajno, u stvari sudbinski vezano. Sada slijedi svjetski ekskluziv intervju sa Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamadom, bivšim premijerom Malezije. Rijetko ljudi u Bosni i Hercegovini znaju ko je u stvari dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamad je azijski Tito, blago rečeno. Bio je lider Malezije, premijer pune 24 godine u 2 mandata. Prvi mandat od 1981. godine do 2003. godine i drugi od 2018. do 2020. godine. Mahathir Mohamad sada ima 98 godina. Rođen je davne 1925. godine, a vidjet ćete u intervju zaista je nevjerovatno u kakvoj se psihofizičkoj snazi nalazi taj čovjek. I kada uporedite to sa intervjuom od prije 10 godina, vidjet ćete da ta osoba, odnosno Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamad, uopšte nije ostario. Jedna nevjerovatna ličnost je dr. Tun Mahathir Mohamad i on je najzaslužniji za ekonomski rast, razvoj i procvat Malezije. Slobodno ću reći, jedan od najvećih političara trenutno živućih. Čovjek koji je Bosni i Hercegovini pomagao i u ratu i u miru, a većina Bosanaca i Hercegovaca to uopšte nije ni znala. Zaista je to zanimljivo kada je dr. Mahathir Mohamad pričao o tome kako je uopšte saznao za rat u Bosni i Hercegovini, za agresiju na Bosnu i Hercegovinu i kako se odlučio da pomaže Bosni i Hercegovini. Fejs je ipak znao ono što ostali Bosanci i Hercegovci nisu znali. Senad Hadžifejzović je 2013. godine lično, zajedno sa svojom suprugom, otišao u glavni grad Malezije, Kuala Lumpur, i posjetio azijskog Tita i tada uradio nevjerovatno važan intervju za cijelu Bosnu i Hercegovinu. 10 godina poslije, Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamad dolazi u glavni grad Bosne i Hercegovine i daje ekskluzivni intervju ponovo za Fejs. Intervju u Bosni i Hercegovini je radio sin Senada Hadžifejzovića, Ali Hadžifejzović. Ovo je inače njegov prvi intervju i to sa kakvim sagovornikom. Pažljivo slušajte i gledajte oba intervjua. Prvo Kuala Lumpur, 2013. godina, Senad Hadžifejzović i Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Jedan zaista vrhunski intervju, izuzetno važan za Bosnu i Hercegovinu. Tada ćete vidjeti da je Senad sa Mahathir Mohamedom najavio neke događaje koji su se nakon toga desili u Bosni i Hercegovini. 10 godina poslije, 2023. godine, u Sarajevo, glavni grad Bosne i Hercegovine, dolazi Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamad i intervju sa njim radi Ali Hadžifejzović. Saznajte zbog čega su obustavljene malezijske investicije u Bosnu i Hercegovini, zbog čega su Malezijci sklonili tu prijateljski pruženu ruku prema Bosni i Hercegovini, koji je iznevjerio Malezijce, koji je slagao Malezijce, i od Tun dr. Mahathir Mohamada pokušavamo da saznamo recept za uspjeh. Zaista je nevjerovatno, poštovani gledalci. Malezija je federacija koja je sastavljena od 13 država i 3 pokrajinska teritorija. I to je ništa u odnosu ovu strukturu, odnosno struktura Bosne i Hercegovine je ništa u odnosu na tu strukturu Malezije, a oni su uspjeli. Kako, zašto, koji je recept, saznajte u intervjuima koji slijede.
Ratu u mojoj emisiji Centralni dnevnik na državnoj televiziji Bosne i Hercegovine, ja sam rekao 23. jula 1995. godine o vama i Maleziji. Malezija, za koju sigurno mnogo Bošnjaka, bosanskih muslimana, nije ni znala da je islamska zemlja, sada tako otvoreno pomaže našoj zemlji. Šta ste znali o nama? Zašto ste nam pomagali i otvoreno nudili pomoć? Nama koji o vama nismo mnogo znali.
But I have read about Bosnia-Herzegovina in history books. Of course, I didn't know much about it. But then one group of Bosnians came here, and that was before the Serbs attack. And they told me about the situation in Bosnia. So I felt very sympathetic towards their plight. So I thought that, well, these are our brothers also, our brothers and sisters. And I think, number one, as a human being, I always have sympathy for those people who are oppressed. And of course, and they happen to be Muslims also. I didn't know they were European Muslims before. I thought they were all Turks. But if they are Muslims, then as a Muslim brother, I feel bound to help even if I don't know. We have done fairly well in Malaysia, and we feel that it is our duty to help others also. We have a slogan called "Prosper your neighbor." Help your neighbor to become prosperous, because then when they are prosperous, they create less problem, and also we can trade with them if they are prosperous. If they are poor, we cannot trade with them, because Malaysia is a trading nation. So we want to see everybody prosper, and if we can help, of course, we should help. Well, in our experience, we were before an agricultural country. Agriculture doesn't create many jobs. Our people were growing in numbers, and many people were unemployed. So we believe that if we have industries, industries employ more people. But then we don't have any capital, any expertise in manufacturing. So we invited foreign investors to come into this country and start industries which use a lot of workers, labor. So that way there was a reduction in unemployment and people became more prosperous.
Šta naši BiH političari trebaju da urade za našu zemlju, Bosnu i Hercegovinu? Vi ste čovjek koji sigurno zna recept spasa za nas.
First, you must make yourself friendly towards investors. If you have investors in your own country, your own people can invest, you have to help them. But if you don't have local investors, domestic investors, then you have to open up the country for foreign investors, and you must have laws and policies which are friendly towards foreign investors. First thing, the country must be stable. Politically, it must be stable. It must have a strong government, and it must have a policy that is contributing towards that stability. We don't want to have racial clashes and fighting between the different races. So people feel sure that if you put money into this country, they will get returns from that money. So because of that, they come. But if the country is not stable, always there is some demonstration, fighting and all that, nobody will put money. And when people do not invest, the economy cannot grow.
Malezija odvaja ogroman procenat od godišnjeg budžeta za nauku, školstvo, edukaciju. Da li je to najvažniji korak ka napretku zemlje?
Certainly is very, very important. A person who has an education can do better quality of work, so he will earn a bigger income.
Naime, nema islamske zemlje u kojoj nema političke krize. Zašto?
Well, we are all Muslims, but although we call ourselves Muslim, we don't practice the teachings of Islam. According to the Quran, The Quran gives a good guidance. The Quran is a guide for humankind, for the Muslims, how they should live. It's a way of life. But we don't follow. Instead of saying that all Muslims are brothers, we kill each other. We fight against each other. That is not Islamic. And instead of, Islam requires us to read. To read means to acquire knowledge. Iqra means read. If you read, you acquire knowledge. But we are not studying science, we are not studying many other subjects besides religion. And because of that, we are very backward. And we cannot develop our country if we are backward. We need knowledge.
Do you have any intention? Kada ćete nam opet doći u našu zemlju? Ako vas ne zovu političari, pozivam vas ja, moja televizija, da budete naš gost i gost našeg naroda.
Thank you. I would like to go again.
Today we are honored. My guest is His Excellency, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Good afternoon and thank you for speaking exclusively for Face Television.
You're welcome.
I am Ali Hajifezovic. My father is Senat, and I'm not sure that you recall, but he was on a visit in Malaysia in 2016 and he did an interview with you. So today you are speaking to the younger version of Senad, and it seems to me that I'm speaking to a younger version of you, since people in Malaysia seem to age backwards to me. So, right before we begin, I would like to introduce His Excellency Dr. Mahathir bin Mohamad a little bit better. So, you are the only politician in Malaysia who served as Prime Minister twice. Your first time serving was from July 1981 to October 2003. And your second term was from May 2018 to March 2020. So you have a total of 24 years serving as Prime Minister. And many consider you the most influential figure in Malaysia's history. What would you say is the secret of your personal success and the success of Malaysia?
Well, as a Malaysian, of course, I love my country and I want to do something for my country. We were at one time colonized by the British. When we became independent, we were very poor. It is incumbent upon the leaders of Malaysia to improve and develop the country. And I contributed something towards the development of Malaysia. And it is something very satisfying, because when you do something for your own country and you see things improving, you get satisfied. I think that is why I still show interest in the development of Malaysia.
I cannot refrain from repeating the question of my father, who asked this question in the interview last time. Why did you openly side with Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war, and why did you help us when you knew almost nothing of us beforehand?
No, we were approached by a few Bosnians who were living in Australia, and they informed us that they are having problem with the Serbs. They want to become independent of Yugoslavia, and they feel that they will face opposition by the Serbs, and they will need help. So when we saw that the fighting was unfair, in the sense that the Serbs were very powerful, the Bosnians had no means to defend themselves. As people who are under oppression, we took an interest in any country. But in the case of Bosnia, of course, it so happened that you are also a Muslim nation in a Christian continent. So we feel that there is a need for us to help in any way we can. That is when we develop contact and relation with Bosnia.
And nevertheless, you have held Bosnia even after the war. And we had projects, investments, and somehow we managed to betray your sincere friendship. For example, the Bank Islam of Malaysia, even though its rules and its practices, it provided loans for the construction of the Bosmal city center. That was proof of your commitment to Bosnia and Herzegovina. But we, as representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina, or better to say, politicians and businessmen in that project seem to ruin it and to have betrayed your trust in investing in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Who is responsible for this?
Well, this is private sector involvement. Of course, we felt that in the initial stage there might be some difficulties. But over time, as we develop better relation, I think such things will not happen. I'm glad to see that in this trip, there's much development which has taken place in Bosnia, and I hope that the Malaysians will renew their efforts to invest in Bosnia.
Another example of this is the construction of the highway corridor 5C, and it seems that somehow Bosnian politicians tried to trick you. Were you deceived? Were you deceived by anyone during this project?
Well, we were disappointed, of course, but in any enterprise, there will be ups and downs. In some places, we are welcome. In some places, there might be some problems. That is normal in business. And business people accept that it's not always that they succeed. Quite often they fail. And in the case of the construction of the road, there were problems with local authorities and local business people. And I think that is not going to affect the good relation between Malaysia and Bosnia.
And do you know who is responsible for this from the Bosnian government?
I really don't know much about that.
And these Malaysian investments, why were they suspended after a while? We know that you have generously helped Bosnia and Herzegovina, but where did these investments disappear after?
Well, I think we had expected, of course, that after the war ended, we would be able to play a part in the reconstruction of Bosnia. However, our own people are not knowledgeable about Bosnia, about the practices here, the laws here. So there would have been difficulties. And difficulties in business is common. And I hope that in the future there'll be more exchanges of visits by Malaysian business people to Bosnia and Bosnian people to Malaysia, so that they become knowledgeable and friendly towards each other. And in business, of course, you need to have a network of people you know. At the moment, we don't have that network.
And under your leadership in Malaysia, Malaysia became considered as an Asia tiger economy. Do you believe that if investments continued in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we would have a similar situation here?
Yes, most certainly. You see, Malaysia had a problem. When we became independent, we were very poor. And we didn't have enough capital to develop the country. We wanted to change from an agro-based country to an industrialized country. but we have no technology, no capital, no know-how about big business, and no knowledge about the markets. So what we did was to invite foreigners to come to Malaysia and invest in Malaysia. And they came because we make ourselves very friendly towards foreign investors. We give them certain privileges. For example, the first 10 years of their business in Malaysia, they will be tax-free. So these are methods of attracting foreign investors to the country. So nowadays, of course, most countries do that. But Malaysia is still, the infrastructure is still very good. So people still invest, foreigners still invest in Malaysia. And I think it can happen also to Bosnia, because you can be friendly to foreign investors. You can have laws that give them certain privileges so that by comparison with other countries, Bosnia becomes more attractive. And foreign direct investment is one way of growing or developing a country. Of course, in Malaysia today, the investment is from domestic sources, because the people in Malaysia learned from the foreign investors on new technologies, new ways of doing business, and now Malaysian investors now go all over the world to invest because they have learned how to invest and how to make use of the advantages given them by foreign countries.
And moving on, I would like to ask you a couple more questions about world politics. So in your last interview with Senat, you have mentioned that Europe had learned that war is bad for them and that it had refrained from having war for almost 60 years. However, the current war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine has happened. And in your opinion, why has this happened? Why has Russia attacked Ukraine? And what is happening currently in the world?
Well, that is a long story. You know that during the Second World War, Russia and the Western nations were partners in the fight against Germany. Unfortunately, when Germany was defeated, the Western partners decided that Russia is the new enemy, and against Russia they must prepare themselves for war. That is why they set up NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO was directly against Russia. It was quite obvious that they invite other European countries to join, but not Russia, because Russia is going to be the enemy. The result is that Russia set up the Warsaw Pact to get the countries near Russia to be prepared to, if there should be any invasion by the Western countries. But unfortunately, the West did not respond to the dismantling of the Warsaw Pact. When Russia dismantled the Warsaw Pact, there was no threat, no defense even by Russia. It became very weak. But instead of NATO being dismantled, they increased the strength of NATO by incorporating the former Russian ruled countries to join NATO. So the threat against Russia becomes bigger. And of course, when they came to Ukraine, Ukraine has got a border with Russia. And if Ukraine joins NATO, the threat against Russia is greater. And before that threat can become real, in the sense that Russia would attack Ukraine, they persuaded Ukraine to join NATO. And Russia objected to that. but they went ahead persuading. But they did not accept NATO, accept Ukraine as a member of NATO. So when the Russians took preemptive action by invading Ukraine, Ukraine has to fight by itself because it's not a member of NATO. If it is a member of NATO, then NATO would have to join Ukraine in the war against Russia. But because Ukraine is not a member of NATO, Ukraine has to fight the war by itself, and it is relatively weaker than Russia. What the European countries have done is to supply Ukraine with arms and money and ask Ukraine to continue fighting against Russia. And as you can see, thousands of Ukrainian people are dying, are killed in the war. The whole country is destroyed, and millions of Ukrainian people had to migrate. The thing is, there is no necessity for Ukraine to join NATO, because Russia was not going to was not at that time going to invade Ukraine. But by asking Ukraine to join NATO, you are provoking Russia to take action, and that is what happens. Russia goes to war, but the NATO nations are not obliged to fight together with Ukraine. Instead, they supplied arms and money to Ukraine, and Ukraine is the country that is suffering from the war.
And do you believe that there is a new world order being prepared through this war? And where are we as small countries in this new world order if it's being created?
Well, I don't think Russia is going to surrender to admit defeat, because it is a big nation. It has never been conquered by Western nation. And so Russia will continue to fight. So there will be no end to the war until, of course, there is agreement that both sides will have to concede certain parts of their country in order to stop the war. And I think the Western nations are bent upon increasing the scale of the war, because they are going all over the world, asking the world to go against Russia. That includes Southeast Asia. But we in Southeast Asia have no problem with Russia. We don't see why we should be involved in the war between Ukraine and Russia. But the Americans are sending the leaders of Ukraine all over the world to seek support. Then if many countries enter into this war, that will be a third world war. That is what we want to avoid, because war is destructive.
And is a country such as Bosnia and Herzegovina thus safe? Are there any indications that some kind of conflict may happen here again because of this war?
Yeah, well, what has happened now is that you can't fight a war on that scale without affecting other countries. For example, the price of food has gone up all over the world, including in Malaysia, because Ukraine used to supply us with wheat and other products. But now it's difficult for Ukraine to export wheat because they have to pass through the Black Sea, through the Marmara Straits, and that means that the cost of food has become higher. So although we are not at war, we are also suffering. Most countries are suffering. That is war. So all countries will suffer if there is any large-scale war.
Another thing that you have previously mentioned in the last interview is that you have criticized Muslim countries in particular, and Muslims as well. You have mentioned how they do not rely upon the Quran, for example, and the teachings such as Iqra or Learn, and you have also talked about hostile relations between Muslim countries in the world currently. And since then, has there been any improvement in this situation? Do you think that something has changed between these countries?
Well, you know, Islam is not just a faith, not just a religion. It is also a way of life. The Quran tells us what kind of life Muslims should lead, what is good, what is bad, but we don't follow. We only perform certain obligations like praying, fasting, zakat, and pilgrimage. We do that. But beyond that, we are not following the teachings as found in the Quran. That is why we find Muslim countries fighting each other. That is forbidden. The Quran tells you that killing people is wrong. You must not kill people. And yet they are fighting each other and killing each other. So when you don't follow the ethics of Islam as spelled out in the Quran, you will have to suffer. Most Muslim countries are more interested in the afterlife than in this life. And because of that, we have become very backwards in terms of knowledge, education, capacity to protect ourselves, to prevent attacks against us. All these are found in the Quran, enjoining upon us to protect Muslim communities. But we are very weak, and when anything happens to Muslim, we are not in a position to help. Today, Muslims are oppressed in China, are oppressed in Myanmar, are oppressed even in India, but we can do nothing because we are all very weak. And we are weak because we don't follow the teachings of Islam.
I have to ask you about the relationship between Europe and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Does Europe want Muslims in the European Union? I'm thinking about Bosnia and Herzegovina primarily in this case.
Well, in the 4th century of the Christian era, Europe became a Christian continent, and we refer to Europe as Christendom. Muslims did come here, but they did not change the religion of the people. At one time, of course, during the Ottoman Empire, the Muslims reached up to Hungary, up to Vienna even, but they were not so successful, and most of them had to retreat. So the opportunity to convert the Europeans to Islam was missed by the Muslims at that time because they were weak. So Europe became Christendom, and they somehow rather look upon Islam as antagonistic, as an enemy almost. Of course, in those days, when during the period of the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans were very strong, and Europe feared the Turks. But now the Europeans have made tremendous progress, and they still, I think, harbor this idea that Europe is a Christian continent, Christendom, and that Muslims have got no place in Europe. So they are always not willing to be very helpful to the Muslim. Yeah, but of course, at one time, Turkey was strong, so they had to respect Turkey. But now that Turkey, for a long time, have lost its place and did not remain as a big, powerful military nation, the Europeans tend to ignore the problems faced by Muslims in Europe. As you know, when Bosnia was attacked by the Serbs, the Europeans actually decided that Bosnia should not have any arms. The arms should only be with the Serbs, which means that the Serbs can kill Bosnians, but the Bosnians cannot defend themselves.
And in the end, I want to ask you of your, well, final opinion of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Do you believe in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Did we let you down? What are the culprits? Will this situation improve between us?
Between us means
Bosnia and Malaysia.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Bosnia has got the same potential as Malaysia was when we became independent. We were poor, but we tried to find ways and means of developing our country. And as I mentioned just now, we had no knowledge about industry. So we invite others to come to Malaysia to start industries in Malaysia and enrich us. So Malaysia became an industrialized country. Before, 80% of our export were raw materials like tin and rubber. Today, 80% of our export is made up of manufactured goods, manufactured by foreigners, manufactured by us also. So it is possible for a poor country to enrich with good governance. Good governance is very necessary. And we see Bosnia as being quite stable, quite peaceful. So when we have stability and peace, you can develop the country. The thing to do is, of course, to see what assets that you have. And I think tourism would be a good asset. It's a beautiful country. Well, during winter you can have winter sports. During the summer, the land is very, well, very beautiful, very attractive, and you have a history. Muslim people would like to know more about Bosnia. So you have this asset, and with this asset developed, then Bosnia also will develop and become at least a middle-income country.
So in the end, you do believe in Bosnia. We have not fully let you down as a country.
Yeah, I think you are not utilizing the assets that you have. Identify the assets, exploit the assets, and you will grow.
Well, in the end, I would like to say that my father, Senat Hajifezovic, he came to Malaysia to thank you for everything that you have done for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And now, at the end of this interview, I will use the opportunity to thank you for your arrival in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And once again, on behalf of all of the citizens in Bosnia and Herzegovina, thank you for everything. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Thank you. Welcome.